as already told, my name is Christoph Callewaert. I'm an attorney at law, associate in the digital business unit at Reuschel. And I'm very happy to be here for this first edition of the MCTTP. I want to talk today about the upcoming EU cybersecurity legislation. What do companies need to prepare for? And I can spoil so much already. It's a lot. So therefore, let's not lose time and go just to the agenda. So my first point is cybersecurity in law. I want to introduce a little bit to the evolution we can observe here. And then I want to talk about the two main legal acts that are coming from the European Union, which is the NIS2 Directive and the Cyber Resilience Act, two different acts, one more company-related, one more product-related. And then at the end, I want to give a little best practice how to be compliant. So the clock is ticking. We have a lot to discuss about. I hope we can answer some questions at the end, but in any case, I will be here for the whole day. So if you have any questions, just ask me and we can talk about those legal acts that are coming. Okay, let's start with cybersecurity and law. And the question here, two unequal sisters, is maybe a little bit provoking because it describes what was the state right now. So we have a dynamic threat landscape. You all know that. With rising digitization and connectivity, we have cyber attacks every day. So it's burning, if you want. And the BSI, so the Federal Agency of Cybersecurity in Germany, noted, for example, for 2021, 20,174 vulnerabilities and cyber attacks. And on the other side, so this is the dynamic threat landscape. And on the other side, we have not zero, but from a harmonized perspective, from a covering perspective for the whole European Union, we have not very much, at least to say. Maybe not zero, but not very much. And this was known or has been recognized now by the European Union, which is the reason why she brings, let's say, the water to extinguish that fire that is burning with two legal acts. That's the two legal acts I want to speak today. It's the NIS2 Directive, which sets out company-related requirements, and it's the Cyber Resilience Act, which sets out product-related requirements. So the NIS2 Directive is already into force. It has now to be transposed into national law, which must be done by October next year. So it's a very short time period until it's applicable. And the Cyber Resilience Act is now in the trilogue, which is the talk between the European Commission, the European Parliament and the Council. So there we expect this to happen for next year maybe for the adoption, and then there will be a period of 24 to 48 months after it comes into force. So that's the two main legal acts that are coming. Therefore, let's start with the NIS2 Directive. NIS2 Directive, as you can see here, this is a fact. 30,000 to probably 40,000 companies will be affected, of which 80% for now are still unaware that they will be affected. So that's a huge problem because clock is ticking here also, and you have to transpose maybe some processes, you have to implement some changes into your business, and therefore you need to know if you're affected. Therefore, let's speak about the addressees of the NIS2 Directive. So it's applicable to a wide range. The EU wants to cover the whole businesses, or at least most of the businesses that are relevant for states. So we talk about in total 18 economic sectors, which are listed in Annex 1 and Annex 2 of the NIS2 Directive. We'll see them in a minute. And there is also a distinction between essential entities and important entities. So for the essential entities, there are two conditions. As you can see here, we have the sectors on the right side and then thresholds or threshold-independent considerations on the left side. The first requirement is that you're doing business in one of those sectors. That's, for example, energy, transportation, banking, but also digital infrastructure, space, public administration, and so on. So that's the first condition. The second condition is then that you overcome certain thresholds. For essential entities, this would be 250 employees. an annual turnover of 15 million, over 15 million euros, and of course that you're providing services into the European or carrying out business in the European Union. There are also threshold independent essential entities. That's, for example, the case for certain digital infrastructure, for public administration, for sole provider, if you're the only company doing certain services, carrying out certain services in a member state. And then you have also operators that are critical because of special national or regional importance. That's up to the member states to define them. So much for the essential entities. Then we have the important entities, and it's, as you can see, the same game. But you have to note that for the Annex 2, for important entities, also the Annex 1 falls into it. So we have in total there, for the important entities, we have in total 18 sectors. Here we have, for example, also mail and courier, chemicals, production, which is a very broad sector, digital services, and also research. Then for the thresholds, they are much lower. Here we have only 15 employees and over 10 million euro annual turnover, and also the condition that you're providing services or carrying out business in the European Union. For the threshold independent conditions, it's almost the same as for the essential entities. So that's the addresses. I must say it's very complex to go through the annexes because, as for the European Union known in the legal acts, you always have indications for other legal acts, and it's very complicated and very, let's say, nitty-gritty to go through it. And therefore, we have discovered that too, and therefore we have created Legal Check, which is simple to use, free of charge. It's just if, in case you want to verify if your company falls on the NIS2 directive, and don't want to go through all of those annexes and so on, you can do it. For the moment, it's only available in German, but we'll maybe do an English version soon. So it's nis2-check.de, and there you can check. It's with simple questions, just in case you want. If you fall under the NIS2 directive, what are the main requirements? So they can be categorized in 3 categories if you want. The first one is governance and awareness. And the BSI, so the federal agency in Germany, has for long years now made the statement, cybersecurity is a matter for the CEOs or for the management. And that becomes now true with the NIS2 directive. So we have here the governance bodies that must approve and monitor the cybersecurity measures taken. And what is very important is that that cannot be delegated. So you can't create a new structure into your company and say, okay, you are now responsible for the cybersecurity. No, it really must be taken, those measures must be taken by the management board. And also they are liable for the infringements. That's for the governance. And regarding the awareness, they must take part in training courses regarding cybersecurity and also offer those training courses to the employees. So that's really to get an awareness in the covered companies of the NIS2 directive. That's the first category. The next category, and which is, in my opinion, one of the most important, is the implementation of risk management measures. So you have, in the first step, a risk assessment that must be done. So the question is always, is there a danger, is there a risk for the network and information systems in the company? And if you have identified certain risks, then you must document them, which is very important also to have a document for the authorities if they are asking. So you have to document them. And then if you have identified some risks, the very important thing is to mitigate those risks with appropriate technical and organizational measures. So that's the next step. First you assess the risks, and then you mitigate them with measures. And the NIS2 directive gives us some hints what can be done in this way. And it's only here a selection, and what is important is that they must be appropriate. So not every company has to accomplish every single measure. So it's very important to see what is the risk and how can I mitigate this risk or reduce it at least. And here is a selection. I've just chosen a few. You can see you can do it by policies, training courses for risk information security policies, It can be done by contractual regulations in the supply chain, which is very important in this case. Technical measures can be done like encryption or cryptography. For the communication, for example, you can use you can implement emergency communications in case of every system is down and you have a cyber attack and you can't communicate via email and telephone. So there's an emergency communication system. You have an incident management, for example, for prevention measures, and also backup management in case of in the worst case, let's say you are affected by a cyber attack. You have to recover. So are there backups? Is there backup management? So that's only a selection. There are much more in the NIS2 directive. But that's, for example, measures that can be taken. What is very important is it's case-by-case decision which measures are taken and which measures mitigate that specific risk. And the last requirement here is the reporting requirements. So in the case of a significant security incident, it is defined in the NIS2 directive what is a significant security incident. So this is seriously or possible disruption of the services or financial losses. And what is interesting is not only for the company itself, but also for other natural legal persons or that may be affected by substantial material or immaterial damage. So in this case, if you have a significant security incident, you have reporting deadlines. The first one here is 24 hours. Within 24 hours, you have to give an early warning, which to the European Cybersecurity Agency, the ENISA, or to national computer incident response teams, which are then to be implemented by the NIS2 directive in the national law. And there, in this early warning, you have to give a first warning what has happened. Are you assuming that is a significant security incident, and give the most details you have for now. Then after 72 hours at least, so if you have this information earlier, you are supposed to give it earlier, but at least after 72 hours, you have to update the early warning. And you have to give an initial assessment of the security incident. So then, with more details and to see, let's say, okay, we identified maybe all of our data are encrypted or all of our data is affected by the incident. So that's the next information or reporting requirement. And the third one is then at least after 1 month, you have to give a final report. And then with the most detail you have with certain conditions which are set also out in the NIS2 directive. So that's the three categories which have to be accomplished by companies under the NIS2 directive. And why should they do so? Okay, that's a legal act, but they have also authority powers and sanctions. They're very broad. So we have sanction measures, which are at least not very low. So we have 10 million fines of 10 million euro, or 2% of the total annual worldwide turnover, whichever is greater, up to. And then, which is very interesting and which we haven't seen before in legal acts, it's a temporary exclusion of the management from its duties. So if the authorities think that there hasn't been any reaction to the incident, there's, let's say, chaos in this company, they can really temporarily exclude the management from its duties and take over regarding cybersecurity aspects. So that's a very broad and very unseen measure that they can take. And also they can spell out warnings regarding this specific company. So let's say they see, okay, there haven't been measures taken, so we have to warn, and they will do it by public warning, and that can have negative effects, of course. So that was the first act, so for the authority powers. And now let's have a look of the roadmap of the NIS2 directive. So the first, the adoption took place in December 2022. It was adopted by EU Parliament and the Council. It is now in force since January this year. 20 days of the announcement. And now we are in the implementation into national law, which must be done, you can see it here, until the 17th of October 2024, next year. And the application will then be 1 day later. And from that day on, you have to comply with all those requirements, which will be then, which have to be implemented before, of course. You cannot start the 17th and say, okay, we'll do that by the 18th. So that has to be anticipated now, because there is not the national law implemented now, and the NIS2 directive isn't implemented into national law now. But we know what will be written in the national law, because from the NIS2 directive, they cannot change any regulations. They can go higher even from the national member states, but they can't go under the requirements in the NIS2 directive. So if you are compliant with the requirements of the NIS2 directive, then you're on a good way to comply also with the national laws. Okay, that's for the NIS2 directive. You see many requirements, many tasks coming up, and the EU taking cyber attacks and cyber risk really seriously. The next act I want to talk about is the Cyber Resilience Act, which is more product focused. And it came up, the draft, 2 years ago by the European Commission President, which said if everything is connected, everything can be hacked. And this is why we need a European cyber defense policy, including legislation setting common standards under a new European Cyber Resilience Act. So it was proposed or announced 2 years ago. 1 year later, they had the first draft, and we will now analyze the first draft, which is now in trilogue, but which is estimated to be adopted by the end of this year, or at least next year. So let's first have a look at the area of application. So it's applicable to all products with digital elements. Products with digital elements are all products that have a direct or that's intended or reasonably foreseeable use, includes a direct or indirect or logical or physical data connection to device or network. It's a very broad application. It can be any software or hardware product and related cloud solutions, but it can also be software and hardware components placed on the market separately. So the application, as for the NIS2 directive, for the Cyber Resilience Act, which covers the products, is very, very broad. And you have also so-called critical products with digital elements, which are divided into 2 classes. You can see it also here on the right of the graphic of the European Commission. You can see it also, it's 10%, probably 10% of the products. And they're divided into 2 classes. And the only difference here is that they have a special conformity procedure, which has to be accomplished. We'll talk about that in a minute. But here you can also see for the products examples, for example, for 90% of the products which fall under the default category are, for example, photo editing software, word processing software, smart speakers, hard drives, games, etc. So that's 90% of the products which fall under the normal category. And 10% of the products which are classified as more critical are, for example, password managers, network interfaces, firewalls, microcontrollers, and even more critical in the class 2 are then operating systems, industrial firewalls, CPUs, secure elements, etc. So that's for the application to the products with digital elements. Also here you can see broad application scale. As for the NIS2 directive for the companies, they try to really cover most of the products on the market with digital elements. The addressees of the Cyber Resilience Act, who has to comply with all those requirements, who has to do the conformity assessment, that's 3 categories. So manufacturers, importers, and distributors. So manufacturers, of course, they're in the focus of the Cyber Resilience Act. It's the most important addressee here, because they're designing the products. So the European Union and the European Commission focuses on them to comply with all the requirements, to implement all the requirements necessary to be cyber resilient. And the manufacturer are the persons who develop or manufacture the digital products. But also, and this is very important, and we know this also from product liability already. It's also a person who lets develop or manufacture and sells it under their own name or trademark. So that's very important too. If you are maybe giving an order to produce a product and you sell it on your own trademark, you will be considered as a manufacturer under Cyber Resilience Act 2. The importers, there's also here the definition, but it's in just the bold words are essential, who are placing the product on the market in the European Union, which comes from outside from the European Union, and also which also considered are distributors which make products with digital elements available on the market, which distribute them. So all three categories of receipts are considered by this Cyber Resilience Act, but the most important are the manufacturers. That's so much for the addressees. Now let's take a look at the main requirements. And I already told you that the most important addressee are the manufacturers. So we have 5 essential obligations, and you will recognize some patterns from the NIS2 directive, which we saw just a minute ago. So the first one is to assess also here the cyber risk prior to the market launch. So during all production steps of the product, you have to consider what are possible risks for the product in relation to cybersecurity. Then after you placed it on the market, you have to observe those products and to monitor them for their entire life cycle, probably, or for at least a defined period, defined then by the European Commission, of the product. And which is very important too, the third condition, which is one of the most important, is to provide free security updates in case of vulnerabilities that are discovered for the product. So there follows a second condition, that the product must be updatable. So if you don't have the possibility to give a free security update to the consumer, then the product is not compliant with the Cyber Resilience Act and has in the end to be withdrawn from the market. So it's a very important condition to be able to give those cyber security updates, and in the case there is a security incident, then to distribute also this security update. The fourth condition is then also reporting obligations in case of security incidents. There are also deadlines, like for the NIS2 directive. This is very similar. And again here, extensive documentation. Document the process. Every single, let's say, meeting has to be documented. Every solution that is found, every aspect that is thought of has to be documented to have something to give to the authorities in case they are investigating your company, for example, and saying, okay, you had an incident. Did you have thought about those problems? If you then can document and give them a whole, let's say, document of 30, 40 pages, what are the thoughts that we had by doing this and that, then they are at least probably more relaxed than if you say, oh, we didn't think of anything. So that's the 5 most important essential obligations for manufacturers. For importers and distributors, the obligations are a little bit different, of course, because they don't produce the product, they don't manufacture it. So their role is different, but they have to a little bit to control if the products they import or if the products they distribute are compliant with the Cyber Resilience Act. Of course, they cannot do the same investigation like, for example, the manufacturer, but they have to observe if key elements, for example, if there is an updatability in the product, or if at least the manufacturer says that there is an updatability of the product, if there's sufficient documentation of the product, if you have contact information of the manufacturer and so on. And they must also provide their own contact information for the distributors and also for the consumers who are buying or for the companies who are buying the products. There is also the bridge to the NIS2 directive. If a company buys a product, for example, with digital elements, then the product must fit also into the NIS2 directive. So we see it's like spider in the web a little bit. So the Cyber Resilience Act will connect the dots a little bit for the new cybersecurity architecture. And also in case of vulnerabilities, if they become aware, okay, we sell this product, we import this product, and there's we became aware of vulnerabilities or cyber attacks on software code that is implemented into the product, then there's also the information obligation to the relevant market surveillance authorities. As for the conformity of the products, there's a conformity assessment which has to be done. We saw it in the beginning. For the 90% of the products, it is self-assessment. You have a list of categories which you must comply with, and you must check and document that you are compliant with that and that you fulfill those obligations. For the class 2 and at least for the class 2, but also maybe for the class 1, there will be third-party assessments that has to be done for the product if it falls under this specific category of critical product. And there's a presumption of conformity, as stated here on the slide, that if you're conform with other legal acts, for example, for the Cybersecurity Act, then there's a presumption that there is a conformity of the product also under the Cyber Resilience Act. And the Commission has the possibility to adopt common specifications, for example, which we can comply with then. And this is, for example, for the case if there are no harmonized standards, which is broadly the case for the moment. And if relevant standards are not sufficient or unreasonable delays in the standardization process, so there will be guidance, but you have to be conform in summary. And also here, we know the game, we have sanctions and fines. It's a little bit like the GDPR, and as introduced, the GDPR from perspective of the European Commission was a success. So they implemented some of the models here, for example, for the fines, also broad inspection powers, multiple fines for the same infringement possibles, and here fines possible up to 2.5% of the total worldwide annual turnover or 15 million euros. So also here we know this, let's say, game from the GDPR where it's 20 million and up to 4% of the total worldwide annual turnover. Here we have this element again. And yeah, so what is not here in the Cyber Resilience Act is the same model as for the NIS2 for the management. To take over the management and to remove it from its duties. That's not foreseen in the Cyber Resilience Act, but here again we have broad inspection powers. Now let's, at the end here, just have a look at the roadmap of the Cyber Resilience Act. So here we are, it was announced 2 years ago, maybe just really 2 years ago exactly. Then the proposal of the European Commission 1 year ago. Now we are in the trilogue between the three parties which decide over the adoption of the act, so the EU Commission, the European Parliament and Council of the European Union. And it will probably be adopted, you never know, but now for now we see that it will probably be adopted 2024, at least 2025. And then there will be a transition period to give a little bit time because there is no national implementation. It's not a directive, so it's after the adoption, it's binding law, and then therefore there will be a transition period of 12 or 48 months, depending on the obligations. So, regarding product cycles, regarding changing of process, also there we have not much time, let's say. And now, after we have seen all those requirements from those two legal acts. How to be compliant, because it's really a large sum of information. I know we went through two legal acts with much information. It's hard to define, am I addressed by this act? It's hard to define what shall I done, how am I compliant if I want to be. And therefore, let's have a little look at the best practice, how to be compliant. And the best way to do this from our perspective is to have a cybersecurity compliance management. So we went through exactly those steps in this presentation now. The first thing is to check the effectiveness, to review the legislation, if you need help for that, then to go to lawyers or to other institutions that may help you by checking the effectiveness. for norms and standards, and also for guidelines and recommendations from the authorities maybe, which have to be respected too. Then to derive specifications from that for the technology, for the organization, for the internal processes, to see what has to be done in our concrete business, in our concrete company. And the next step is then the implementation, the risk assessment, the corrective measures, and as already pointed out, very important, the documentation. And the last point is maybe one of the most important in this whole gameplay, because it's not, compliance is an ongoing process. It's not done once and for all. So you have to monitor internal processes. Are we changing things in our business? Even small changes can lead to other to an effectiveness by other legal acts. So it's very important to observe that. Are we changing things in our business model? Also very important. Changes here can also lead to another effectiveness, to other specifications, to other implementation methods that have to be done. And also the legal situation, especially for the NIS2 directive. We know what will at least be into the NIS2 directive in national law, but maybe they will go higher a little bit in some requirements. So this has to be observed, and also for the Cyber Resilience Act, which is at the moment in draft status. Also there you will have to observe, are there changes coming? Are they implementing new requirements for my business maybe? So it's an ongoing process, and if you set this up once and review it from time to time, at least if you change things, and in other cases in a regulatory period, then you have great chances to be compliant even with all those acts that are coming. Okay, so much from my side. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open to questions now. Thank you very much.
Okay. So, first question, second question. Okay, I come.
Ja.
Hallo, ich habe eigentlich zwei Fragen. Und zwar die eine ist, gibt es ein ähnliches Gesetz... sorry, English, I'm sorry. Screw it. Sorry.
No problem.
I have two questions. You know, one is there is similar law in the US to the CRA, Cyber Resilience Act. And the second question was, there is a regulation for the automotive industry called UNECE WP29. And what is the connection of CRA and this UNECE thing?
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. So for the US, to my knowledge, there is not, at least in this stringent legal act, right comparable to the Cyber Resilience Act. There are acts regarding cybersecurity, but I don't think that there is comparable act to this. So European Union here, as for the GDPR, moves forward, and maybe then afterwards it will be implemented into other legislations too, or comparable legal acts at least. The second question was, if you can just give me in, right?
The UNECE.
Yeah, the UNECE, thank you very much. So UNECE and other models like, for example, ISO 27001, we have covering some legal aspects, but Cyber Resilience Act probably will go beyond that. So if you're compliant to those regulations already, it's a good start. Nobody, I think, from now, nobody has to start from a blank page. There are requirements already, but the Cyber Resilience Act and also the NIS2 directive will go beyond what is there for now. So there is a certain conformity of those acts and models, but the Cyber Resilience Act will go beyond that. Thank you.
Hello. So my question is about NIS2.
Yeah.
NIS2. So the sanctions that you show, is it only for the essential entities, or is it also for important entities?
So that's a good point. So in general, the sanctions will be for essential and important entities. So the only difference is that the management, removing the management from its duties, it's only for the essential entities. So that's an important differentiation. But in general, all the other sanctions and fines are nearly identical.
Okay. And the next question, I am more familiar with ISO 27001. And for example, I saw that here there are some requirements for letting people know about the incident that we don't have it in ISO 27001. But generally, if you want to make a mapping, what do we have in NIS2 that we don't have it in ISO? That would be great.
I got this question already in a previous talk I had, and I must say, so it's at the moment it's difficult to exactly say it because as we know, the national implementation goes on, and they can even go higher from what is now in the NIS2 directive, in the European directive, because it has to be transposed into national law. If you want a coverage in percent, but it's very difficult to say, so don't take my words here, but maybe, let's say, up to 60%, maybe a little bit more, that is already covered if you are compliant to existing models like ISO or maybe also EU and ECE, but it has to be analyzed case by case. So you can make you can say, okay, if you're compliant with that, you're also compliant with that. There are certain things that are covered, but so approximately, I would say but it's just my opinion, maybe, about 60%. And then there you have a special, or there's at least a possibility of other requirements that you have to comply with. But also here, it's very important to say the measures that has to be taken are to be adapted in case by case. So if you choose, if you don't have the same risk as another company, you don't have to take the same measures. So if you see we have only 3 medium risks, then the measures that you will have to take are much lower than a company which says, okay, we have 6 high risks for our infrastructure. Then it depends on. Thank you.
Question. A short question about the CRA. Is there any differentiation in the CRA between business to business and business to consumer devices and machines?
Not really. So for now, and that's the point. All products with digital elements shall be covered, and maybe they change because it's in discussion, but it don't look so. There was some leaks of the discussions for now, and what we see now, it's only small, minor things that are changed for now, but not the general line. So the aim for the NIS2 directive and for the Cyber Resilience Act is to make more resilient the whole European Union, the whole single market, to avoid all those damages. I read something about 20 billion from 1 year only of damages of cyber attacks and going onto companies and products, and therefore they want to cover the whole product and the whole at most companies as possible.
Okay, very last.
Yeah.
Thank you. One question: you showed a timeline when the law is going into enforcement in the states.
Yeah.
What we saw in GDPR is that it takes some time for the first fines to appear, to get into action. Is there a grace period you expect?
There will be a transition period, at least for the Cyber Resilience Act, but in my opinion, as you already said, and as for the GDPR, market surveillance authorities won't go first day to your company and say, okay, show me your compliance, and if you're uncompliant, you are receiving a fine of 10 million or 50 million or 2.5%. That won't happen, I think so, because there will also be this transition period, unofficial transition period, probably. You never know, but I think that there will also be this unofficial transition period where they don't come with the most important measures from day one. And what helps in generally, and this is my most important advice maybe, is the documentation. If you can show we identified that we may fall under one of those legal acts, we did make an assessment of our company of the risks, we documented that, and we found some mitigation measures to mitigate those risks, then even if it's not sufficient from the perspective of the respective authority, then you will they won't give you the highest fine. So maybe they will say, okay, have a look at that problem, have a look at this, but then be compliant. But the aim must be to be compliant with cyber security law, and it's like for the GDPR, after a certain time, fines will come, measures will come, and we will also see management removed from its duties.